Give it 10 seconds once we see ourselves on the stream.
It looks live on my end.
Yes, we are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very honored to be here sharing space with you all again. My name is Ferchil, and welcome to MOSAICS 4, where we will be exploring personal boundaries. My pronouns are he, him, his. But at first, before we carry on into exploring what our boundaries are like in this Q&A with these beautiful, talented creatives and humans, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the space that we're trying to move through and work with, especially in this being one of the most, the hardest weeks of the hardest month of the hardest season that I know I have experienced and maybe others have experienced. With that said, I want to acknowledge we are on stolen land first and foremost, but we need to acknowledge the lives that have been lost to police brutality and those that are hurting because of what has happened and what's taking place to George Floyd and countless others, not just this week, but throughout, America's history and the original sin that it has created and continue to live through, and just it shows up in this work, and we're here to dismantle it. And in order to do so, let's first take a moment of silence to acknowledge the lives lost to that. So if you will do me this favor and do us this favor, let's take a moment. Thank you so much. So welcome to MOSAICS 4, exploring personal boundaries. Again, my name is Ferchil. I have this honor of being the MC for the third year in a row. I'm very blessed that they asked me back, even though, I do what I do. But I'm honored to be in this space. And before we continue, I would love to have the co-producers, Mo and Natasha, please introduce what is MOSAICS and what are we doing here and why are we doing it like this? I think would be a good context as we carry on to this Q&A about exploring our boundaries.
Yes, so I'm Natasha, one of the co-producers. Essentially, MOSAICS is about healing and using art as a vehicle for that, and engaging in conversations around why we do the things that we do. Where did we learn these things from? With the hopes that we can thoughtfully and intentionally connect deeper to our communities, as well as offer the type of leadership that we feel like we haven't quite seen, and help to push things forward through that healing process, through really thinking critically about where we are as people. And so the artist Q&A portion of MOSAICS, which is now 4 years old, has always been probably the part of the event that people really seem to gravitate to, people really seem to take from it in a way where they then start to really think about, well, what are my boundaries, right? We've also looked at policing and code switching. How do I engage in these activities? How does that impact me? How does that impact the people around me? So we really wanted to make sure that we continue that process, because it's more than just having art performances and having people share their art, but it's also about people engaging in that process that we're asking our artists to do, which is to be reflective and to really think about, where did any of this come from for us? So who taught you about boundaries and those types of things? So we're here virtually because we're in the middle of a pandemic. But that did not stop us from continuing to have these important conversations, which we hope can be healing for everyone in the process. And especially now, I think now is a really good time to rethink all of your personal boundaries.
Mo, would you like to say a word or two? You could even take 3 or 4. No.
Oh, gosh, you're so generous. Hi, everyone. I'm Mo, one of the co-producers, co-founders with Nat. Personal boundaries, I mean, for me, I didn't know they were a thing until like well into my 20s. And it was a topic that we considered well before the state of emergency, before the shelter-in-place orders. Because even outside of this quote-unquote new normal, the boundaries that I was, implementing or not implementing needed work. And I know I'm not the only one. And so I'm really hopeful that the dialogue that we have here, while it's in this strange format, can continue to, help provide some guidance for us. Yeah.
Thank you both. Not just for the words that you share right now, but definitely creating this space. I find it really important, especially during the Q&As. And Nat, you're right. A lot of people do take away a lot afterwards. So much so that last year, I believe y'all had an extra session to help process, I believe, some of the things that you were all exploring. And that's important, because that's what we're doing here. We're processing all of these things. And with that said, hopefully people were able to take a look at the Artist Building Community Instagram page this week. You might have met some lovely creatives through there, like Simone and Olivia Jewell and Kelsey, Skylar, of course, and many countless others. You might have seen the art of Mitch. You might have seen Alyssa. I still have Jill Scott in my head because of that. So I think with that said, we'll begin to explore these different questions that we want to talk about, including what our personal boundary is, kind of what Mo was hinting at. What did our family teach you about these boundaries? And how does it feel to set a boundary with someone else? So those are kind of the things that we'll be exploring. And I think I might just take it in random order. And let's begin with Skylar, if you don't mind. Skylar, what are your personal boundaries and what does that look like to you?
Oh, woo! First of all, let me ask a clarifying question. To respect the community's boundaries, the policy on swearing, please. Seriously.
That's a very good question because I.
Seriously.
I could bite my tongue. I defer.
Mo, Nat, is that okay if I that accidentally on purpose happens?
Accidentally and on purpose.
Right, cool.
I would just ask that we keep it to a minimum in case there are like young people, people with kids who are watching. So I would just ask for a little grace. I won't completely say don't do it at all, but just a little grace.
Thank you. I needed to ask that question. Ask me again, Ferchil, please.
Sure. I want to know specifically from you, Skylar, what are your personal boundaries? And if you would like to introduce yourself, like maybe a sentence or two, I think that'd be very helpful for context.
Yes. I'm Skylar McCurran. I'm a flawed human, and I'm really grateful to know and love Nat and Mo and Ferchil and Kelsey and many of the other humans on this call and get to know the others. I've been focused on financial boundaries. I started learning negotiation and self-advocacy, helping people earn more money at their jobs from self-advocating. And I had to learn that through the really hard way of being exploited for the majority of my career. And I think that the biggest, I would define my boundaries in like the biggest are four. And I really struggled with this question the most out of all of them, because I also want to preface by saying I'm nowhere near excellent at it, which is why I also think I'm a great person to help people define it, because I understand exactly how difficult it can be. But my personal boundaries are: number one, I ask that all human beings that engage with me, you have to honor my value and see it and respond and treat me accordingly. That's number one. And sometimes that's not even about like what someone may say, it's more like how they show up for you. Being where they say they're going to be, honoring my time like it's valuable and just as precious as theirs. That would be my number one. Number two, I respond to people who encourage me to take up more space. That is another boundary. When people are encouraging me, or in spaces that are encouraging me to shrink myself, and I feel that, I can feel even like the pressure to want to contort around that, that is a violation of a boundary. I need to be around community and human beings that help me expand, not shrink. The third is that someone is willing, and that that human beings make room for my willingness. And that means also that it will be messy. It will not be linear. And I've had a really difficult time actually like enforcing that boundary in personal relationships, professional relationships. And I'm so glad that I also learned that that was something that I really needed to do. The fourth, this is going to sound really general and vague, but you know, it ties into George, Brianna, Ahmad, Mark, Eric, like, excuse me, Mike, Eric, like everything, which is basically like, you need to see me, and that's a boundary. And I can tell if you can see me or not sometimes just by the questions that people say. And also like, if you can make room for me, I also know you can make room for other Black folk and also humans and warriors of color from different communities. So honor my time, treat it with respect. You can see me. Those are the most important ones.
Thank you, Skylar. I think what resonated with me was that expand, not shrink phrase. I think we often do that, you know, or I'm projecting. This isn't everyone's experience. I know that I do that often in order to make others comfortable, and that is a violation of my own boundary. You're right. Mm-hmm. Does what Skylar said resonate with anyone else, and would anyone like to speak to that? I'll take that as a maybe. If you hold on to that, we can also explore later on when we call out you. Exactly what I said. If I would like to know, let's say from Bye-Bye, what are boundaries to you? And if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bye-Bye. I'm really grateful to Mo and Nat for creating this space. I'm from Southeast San Diego as well. But currently in Brooklyn and always finding a way to return back home through this space. So I'm So grateful. And your question was, what are boundaries to me?
Yeah, what are your personal boundaries?
My personal boundaries. I resonate with what you said, Skylar. Thank you so much for your talk. Good Lord. Oh, yes. Yes.
Thank you, sister, your glow and your talents. I appreciated your message. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Teaching me so much. Yes. My
I can help you.
yeah, yes. My personal boundaries, I'm still growing as well. It's something that I am learning for real, maybe in the past 5 years. I have been a caregiver for much of my life, from the womb, caring for my mother, caring for my family, caring for students, caring for sisters, caring for artists. And a lot of my boundaries are around labor, around right now my boundaries are harsh because I'm just learning them. So right now my boundary is no free labor. None, never, no, no, no free labor. Woo. And oh my God. That I would just start with that one, and then whatever other boundaries I'm trying to create come from, does this nourish my libido? Does this nourish my creative energy? Does it create rest in my life? And if it doesn't, then no. No. And does this create solidarity? Is this willing, whatever this is, whatever this person is, this situation, this opportunity, is it willing to investigate solidarity in all ways, in all intersectional ways? And if not, no. Those are my three. I'm gonna just stick to that. Thank y'all for holding the yelling. Does it let you yell, and does it let you have joy? Because if it doesn't, no.
That part. If it does not nourish us or sustain us, then what are we doing with it, right? I want to thank you, Bye-bye, for sharing that. I remember watching you first dance at the first MOSAICS, and that was really incredible. I'm going to transition to somebody that I first saw dance at last year's MOSAICS. Alyssa, you know I'm coming to you. So Alyssa Juniors, would you please introduce yourself to the crowd, and also tell us what your personal boundaries are.
Hey everyone, I just want to start by saying hi, and I'm really happy to be here. I needed this. I needed something to show up to today. So I'm just grateful to be here with you artists. It's being an artist has become my purpose, and in these moments is what I go to have a safe place. So I'm grateful. My name is Alyssa Junius. I am a local artist, educator, and creator. And for me, I'm so grateful that Mo and Natasha had invited me to perform last year, because last year was a very transformative year for me. I had been creating and living in a bubble in North County, San Diego, and just being in the presence of other artists really allowed me to expand, just like what Skylar was saying, grow and expand. And the thing that I thought about is this space, Artist Building Community, has allowed me to have a place to be curious and not just perform. A place to just be an artist and be able to question without punishment. When we talk about boundaries when I was growing up. I didn't know like as a child, my boundaries were don't do this, don't touch this. Like my parents told me like go here, don't go there. I was the only child for 5 years, and then my sister was born. Then I learned boundaries with having a sibling. Then I went to school as a 5-year-old, and I learned boundaries in a classroom. Sit here, raise your hand, go to the bathroom, and all these things. And then I had my first boyfriend, learned boundaries when it comes to my body. Then I went to college and learned boundaries when it comes to meeting people of different cultures and backgrounds. And then I had my first job and learned professional boundaries like Skylar talked about, and fighting for my my worth in the workplace. And then now as a leader, I'm practicing boundaries when it comes to when I'm holding space for others, when I'm creating for others. And for me to, when I, as a leader, I can feel a little bit anxious about, am I doing something right? Am I doing this and that? And for me, the question I always ask myself is this healing for me? I can only honor my experience and share. And am I growing from it? Am I glowing in it? And I honor that as my personal boundary. Those are the questions I ask myself. And as an artist, I'm choosing to share that experience and in hopes to collectively heal. So that's kind of what personal boundaries mean to me. I just appreciate the platform to show up, to share space. And this week, like watching the artists like on IG Live and seeing the gallery, it just was like, the magic that we create is so healing, and it's so validating, whether we're creating it, whether we're speaking it, whether we're witnessing it. And I really do feel like as artists, we are building community. So I'm just so happy to be here. I'm done talking, but just, oh, do you want to know about my piece, or should I just?
That's a good question. Maybe we'll explore that in a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I probably should have asked that in the beginning.
Yeah.
But we'll get there, I guess.
Yes, I'll just start off like that. So.
Okay. Thank you, Alyssa. Appreciate it. You spoke of the different pieces online and how the ones kind of gave you life. I want to introduce this next person who gave me life through their piece. And I've never met Olivia. And just watching, I'm like getting goosebumps again, just like thinking about watching the piece and how she explored their boundaries. It was, yeah. So I'm done talking about it. So I'm gonna let Olivia actually speak about it a little bit further, about maybe a little bit about the piece, about yourself, and what are your personal boundaries to you?
Thank you so much. Boundaries. That's a complicated subject. For me, when I saw this, I knew that I had to join because now more than ever, I'm exploring. Oh, by the way, I'm Olivia Jewell. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself at all. I just started talking. I'm Olivia Jewell. I'm from San Diego. I just graduated from UCSD in 2019 and received a degree in dance and a minor in theater. Boundaries. Yeah, I am learning that I am not the sum of anybody's expectations, that I am my own person. And that's really difficult for me to sit with sometimes, because I'll be feeling really guilty when I don't meet somebody else's needs, because that's how I was raised. I was raised to serve my mother. I've always been a mother to my mother, which is problematic because, I've had to sacrifice a lot of myself to sustain and nourish another person. And for me, this whole project is about reclaiming that, my spiritual, emotional, physical, mental boundaries myself. So I think a lot about, I'm also a survivor of sexual assault. I think a lot about physical boundaries and how that is tested a lot in society. It's like, it's complicated. A lot of this is complicated. But I am learning that I'm enough. I'm learning to choose myself. I'm learning to uplift my voice. I really love what you said, Skylar, about going to spaces that expand you. I've done a lot of shrinking my whole life. I'm over that. I'm over it. I'm over it. I, as like an ethnically ambiguous Black person too, like I'm making sure that like I'm heard, and that I'm making sure that like my Black brothers, sisters, siblings are heard as well. That I'm speaking up for myself and for them, because I know that I'm a person, like based on the way that I look, you might hear me, you might listen. You know what I'm saying? So like I'm really trying to pay attention to like my role and how I'm serving myself and how I'm serving my communities. Yeah, boundaries.
Yeah. Thank you, Olivia. Appreciate that.
Mm.
And thanks for like sharing your piece. If you haven't seen it, again, it's on Artist Building Communities Instagram IGTV page. Also on Artist Building Communities Instagram, you might find a piece that's called "My Boundaries Aren't" or "Are or Aren't." And so I'd like to transition to that artist, Trisha. Please introduce your piece. And if you'd like to, you could also please tell us about your personal boundaries.
Hello, I'm Trisha. I grew up in North County, San Diego, and now I'm in Brooklyn. Yeah, I'm really grateful for the space first. I heard of it from Babai, who is friends with Mo and Nat, and so I feel that it's just been a really beautiful space because it's allowed me to play and experiment and think, you know, like process these things that are in my head that I usually don't make time to process. And so something that I've been working on, my boundaries, yes, my boundaries. I've been working on that. I've always known what not to do versus what to do. And so my pulse checks and my intuition have always been what doesn't feel good. And so like I'll go do something and sometimes very carelessly just do something and then go, oh, that wasn't a good idea. Okay, don't do that again. And that's kind of how in the past I'd always found my boundaries and found where I need to put myself and situate myself. And so recognizing that these last few years by, you know, repeated experiences, repeated moments within communities, within specific friendships and relationships that I've been a part of, I've been meditating on that. And so I've started creating these dolls. I call them trauma monsters. And they initially started out as a way to like hold the things that hurt me, that harmed me, and kind of create a name and a space for them so that I could care for them or not care for them or whatever. But then through the course of creating them, they started becoming more as like a protection space, I guess. And it helped me kind of understand like where exactly in my body these traumas lie and like how to recognize when something doesn't feel right, because I think I have a hard time recognizing those things. So yeah, so I'm working on my boundaries. I'm working on figuring out time for myself, space for myself, and just noticing, yeah, like what feels good and what doesn't before, you know, jumping off a cliff and doing something that probably is not great. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Trisha. I appreciate it, Trisha. I would say Brooklyn's in the house, but it seems like everyone is in the house, almost literally. Nowadays, anyways. That said, I want to transition to another artist that was on Instagram Live or doing their IGTV piece, Araceli. Would you like to please introduce yourself, your piece, and also tell us about your personal boundaries?
Sí. Hola, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. I am completely honored to have been a part of this process, and I can't wait to see more of this growth through MOSAICS. Gracias, Natasha, for the invitation, and Mel for creating this space for all of us. Araceli Carrera, and personal boundaries. Personal boundaries. I learned them from a very young age. I saw a lot of violence at home. And so when that happened, immediately, the moment I realized that that was not supposed to happen, I developed a mantra that has continued to live with me, which is, I deserve better. I deserve better. And those words have been growing intensely in me. And so it allows me to say what I need, and it allows me to respect what you need. And I love our first speaker who mentioned, respect. For me, personal boundaries is about respect. I will share my opinion, you will share yours. I will respectfully listen to you, respectfully listen to me. We don't have to agree, but let's have respect. Let's value each other for what we bring. And then when I was also young, I lived in Tijuana, and I had to come over here. So culturally, it was a big shock for me. Yo soy Mexicana, and we love greeting people. We love like hugging people. And it was really shocking for me to have people immediately say, hey, I don't know you. Why are you? No. And it was a simple good morning, good afternoon. And so that got me really confused. But regardless, I continue doing it. Why? Because these are the things that I value. And so I need to have that be present at all time. And like I said yesterday, as a teacher, I value my role so much that is what I get emotional, because my students are this beautiful opportunity for me to share that. So I tend to always infuse my classes with that, with the idea that your personal boundaries speak of who you are, and you need to feel respected, and you need to allow those to come forth. And when you don't want something, speak up and say it wholeheartedly, and value that that esa cualidad, that quality that lives in us, to be able to speak up for what you want and what you need. Yes, so I try to have that continually live in me. And like many of the artists who just mentioned, I think personal boundaries holds itself in this continuous form. Like it grows, it lets go, it comes back. So there's this beautiful continuous organic rhythm that it can be created. And I know it's scary for some of us, but I think that courage right now is what is needed. So I will continue to live in that manner, and continue to try to inspire, because that's what I want. I want life to inspire me regardless of everything that is bringing towards me. I want to be surrounded by that. And I'm so lucky that I am right now in this moment to share this space with every single one of you. So thank you. And I hope it continues.
Thank you so much, Araceli. I appreciate that. I love that. You're right. Courage right now is exactly what is needed. And I am lightweight jealous that you were able to find boundaries at such an early age. It took me quite some time, well into my 30s, before I even realized that. And like a lot of folks have said, they're all experiencing that right now as well. That we're continuously exploring our boundaries that stay in flux sometimes. But you, like others, are inspiring the youth to actually explore that and do that. And as a transition with that one. So thank you for that work that you do. Another person that I know that also works with youth is one of our artists here. And she already know I'm gonna call on her. So I've had the pleasure of knowing Michelle for quite some time now, and seeing her develop into this beautiful human being and talented artist that works with the youth has been quite inspiring to myself personally. I've never told her that, but she knows now. To see what she's doing with that is wonderful and amazing. So I'd like to introduce Mitch. Please, tell us about your pieces, introduce yourself, and tell us what your personal boundaries are. Thank you for being here.
My heart's like beating really fast and my armpits are sweating about what you just said. Thank you, Ferch. Hi, my name is Michelle. I am a middle school art and English teacher in City Heights, San Diego. I shared their pieces actually this week. This was from my GSA class, Genders and Sexuality Alliance. And we did have the discussion about their personal boundaries. And I think while listening to y'all and like trying to think of my own personal boundaries, first of all, like 5 minutes before this, I like ran downstairs. I asked my partner, like, yo, what are my boundaries? And it like just goes to show, like, no one else is going to tell you what your boundaries are. Like, that's what you set for yourself. But I was like, she was saying all these things and I was like, okay, so I have a lot, but I also don't have any because I'm not following them for myself. And that's kind of where I'm at with that. And so I think from what my students have shared, the one thing that's been standing out to me is just that, like, you know, setting boundaries is awkward. Setting boundaries is awkward, especially if you've never fully learned how to set them for yourself. And you know that like you do have them, but because of wherever you're at, the two words that I wrote down were comfortability and availability. And that's like the question I wrote was, and in terms of my own personal boundaries, it would like be nice to ask others as well as have others ask of me is if I'm available to be present right now. And like comfortability, I'm now realizing, you know, it's not always going to be a part of setting boundaries on either person, whether it's for setting it for yourself or trying to respect someone else's. Yeah, it's going to be awkward. And so that's not necessarily what that's about. But so a lot of my boundaries are about how we're being available for each other, I think, and recognizing when we can and cannot be. Because like when I started the conversation with my students, you know, I shared this whole list of like, yeah, with my family, it's like, don't come into my room. Or with my students, oh, if I'm talking with another student, don't come up to me and things like that. And so, again, recognizing like there is a space and time for certain things. And as much as it is like, you know, telling other people don't do this, it's telling yourself that you need to do this time for you, or you need to have this time for you, kind of a thing. So you need to give yourself 5 minutes to like yell about whatever it is that's stressing you out. Or you need to tell so-and-so and be vocal about it that you don't want them in your space right now because you're pissed. Or you just need to like, I'm in the middle of finals and I want to finish this, don't talk to me, whatever that is. And so, yeah, boundaries, still work on it. It's awkward, but yeah. And so a lot of the things that my kids, I guess, made and wrote and talked about were definitely a lot more physical. And I think, you know, that's something to recognize as like growing up or learning, like, not all your friends want to be hugged. Having like coming from families where everybody, oh, greet your uncle and your auntie and all this stuff. That was a big conversation. Like, I don't want to hug my uncle because that's weird or something like that. And recognizing like your own personal space is important. And like from a younger age, it's always like either a cultural thing or like because they're your elder type of a thing, and how, but you still have, you know, the right as a youth to like say, nah, this is not for me right now. And just really listening to kids. If you want to learn about boundaries, talk to a middle schooler because they'll be cutthroat and not know your boundaries. And so you'll figure it out then, you know? But that's where I'm at. I'm gonna say that much. That boundaries are awkward, but they're necessary.
I agree with you. I think they can be extremely awkward. But I think that's part of the exploration part, right? I think even just as we give ourselves grace, learning what our own boundaries are and forgiveness, it sometimes it's trial and error. And as you kind of spoke about earlier, sometimes our families didn't teach us what that looks like. And that can be very difficult. If you're not equipped with the right tools, how the fuck are you supposed to build? And that is my one swear that I will probably say for now until I slip up again. For my next performer and our next artist, I would love to introduce this beautiful soul that I have also seen evolve, especially once she went mask off. And Kelsey has been quite a force, especially in these last 2 years. If you were able to watch her IGTV that was on the Instagram, you'll see that she does not just all the things, but aside from being doing Check Please, help organizing March for Black Women, and even the Black Women Deserve Mutual Fund. Kelsey does a lot, and I'm gonna speak no more about that and let her speak for herself regarding this. So Kelsey, you want to tell us about your boundaries?
Yeah. So boundaries are something that I'm coming into, or honestly, it's something that I'm allowing myself to have more than coming into, right? I think there are things that they make logical sense that I've known for a while, but I haven't always felt like I've had access to owning them. I've had access to articulate them. And so on my live, I talked about how one of the words I chose for 2020 was please. And not like a question like, please do something for me, but the idea of like pleasing, like who does this please? What purpose is it serving? Is it giving something? Honoring the fact that sometimes something doesn't please me, but it's pleasing a larger good, and that's fine too. But like being able to also take ownership of, if it's not pleasing me, what can I do to shift it? Like where can I place my boundary to say that I deserve to be pleased? Like I deserve to be able to have pleasure. In all of my different interactions. Something else that like all of my friends know that I say all the time is like yes and. And I think a part of my boundary is honoring yes and honoring complexity. Honoring that things aren't going to be black and white, and I'm allowed to have that too. I'm allowed to like speak that. I'm allowed to sort of the complexity of it. I'm allowed to not feel shame about feeling these duality, these conflicting emotions, especially right now with what's going on in the world, what's going on in the country. I'm finding myself both angry and afraid. I'm finding myself wanting to take to the streets, but also wanting to be protective of my health, protective of the health of the people that I love, and trying to navigate those things. The last 24 hours, I'm going to be very frank, have been so difficult in dealing with other people's expectations of what should be happening and honoring my boundaries of where I want to move. And luckily, I have people that I love who I'm organizing with who collectively acknowledge my boundaries. But that doesn't make it easy, right? It doesn't make it any less hard when you have people who look like you criticizing how you choose to move while agreeing, And so I'm allowing myself that. Another boundary is like allowing myself grace. Grace when I'm right and grace when I'm wrong. And like calling myself worthy in all of it. And that has been really transformative for me. And the last one is actually a phrase that at my job, we had somebody come in and lecture for our youth, and they were talking about one of the principles of healthy relationships is make space, take space, right? And the way that I think about that too is like, my natural being is nurturing, my natural being is showing up for folks and like creating space. But also like honoring the fact that I'm allowed to take that same space that I create for others, that I'm allowed to rest, which is like, I had to literally, and while we're on this call, I'm getting text messages left and right about like, can you join this meeting? Can you do this? What are y'all gonna do? And I'm setting the hard boundary that tomorrow at 3 p.m., I'm taking my organizer hat off. Don't message me, or you can message me and it's gonna be there until I respond, which is a really hard line that I'm realizing that I have to be able to take, because if I'm going to be any good to anyone else, I have to be good to myself. And that's not something that's easy, especially when you talk about how identity shape how you move through boundaries. And being a Black woman, and all of the expectations of what it's supposed to look like for me in movements, just as an individual. I jokingly talk to my friends and I talk about like how I believe I'm Mammy's revenge, right? The archetype of Mammy that's supposed to be nurturing and like owning that that's something that I care about, but also I get to exercise my boundaries in maybe the way that, you know, women who come before me didn't get to, right? I get to be very vocal. I get to be angry out loud. And that is also how like I reclaim for me and my past and my future. So that was a very wordy explanation of where I'm at right now with boundaries.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. I appreciate you and the work that you do. Um, I love when you're talking about reclaiming you, not just for your past self, your current self, and also your future self. You know, I think when we talk about protecting our own boundaries, and you know, we're also talking about our own inner peace, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily meet the expectations of others that they place upon you. You know, with that said, I kind of want to reflect with our next artist, who you can also find in the gallery that is on the Instagram, Alexia. Please, you have a couple pieces on here actually through the gallery. If you'd like to explain your pieces on personal boundaries and also talk to us about your own personal boundaries as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think I'm gonna start with the question first and then kind of circle back to the piece, if that's okay. So I'm Alexia, pronouns she, her, hers. So I resonated a lot with what Mo and you, Ferchil, said about not knowing boundaries until later in life. And I feel like that's a lot because I was kind of a really quiet kid. I didn't really speak up. I just kept to myself. I didn't really tell my parents much. And also, you know, having those awkward encounters with relatives, as Mitch mentioned, that we're forced to kind of hug. I have a very vivid memory of, you know, hiding from an uncle because I didn't want to say hi to him. You know, I didn't want to hug him. So I think a lot of where my boundaries and feeling where they come from comes from feeling my biological responses to what's happening around me. You know, am I shaking? Am I forcing myself to do stuff that I don't want to do? And is that causing me to, you know, panic? Is that causing me to retreat to shelter later on because I don't want to be around other people, or I don't want to interact with other people? So kind of listening to those biological responses within myself, because, you know, as a quiet person growing up, I didn't really want to talk about it, you know, with anybody around me. So, you know, that's why it's so important for me too, to also find these kinds of spaces like MOSAICS to push myself to, you know, use my voice. You know, I kind of came into a challenge with myself in trying to decide if I really wanted to participate in MOSAICS, not because it's, you know, not because it's something that I didn't want to do, but because I'm always questioning if I want, you know, I'm always questioning, am I doing enough? Is my work enough? You know, will someone recognize me? Am I memorable? That type of thing. You know, so I really appreciate these types of things where the nervousness that I feel that comes from it, it actually tells me to lean in and to expand on these ideas that I was quiet from in the past. So, you know, given the quarantine, a lot of people do know me as like a visual artist, right? So I'm not a performer, you know, I'm not good at public speaking. I try a lot, but, you know, I feel awkward, like, you know, like what Mitch says. But I felt a lot of pressure to create, you know, to create art. You know, are you creating a piece based on the quarantine, based on what's going on in the world? And getting that question from people, or like, you know, seeing other people do their art and feeling the pressure on myself that I need to do something. So I think that works in with it too, realizing that, you know, I don't always have to be artsy. Like, I know that sounds weird. And in my brain, I'm artsy, right? But I don't always have to perform this art for other people and that I can, hold the space for myself to navigate, why I'm not feeling up to it, why I'm feeling so tired, why, how can I actually push myself to join spaces like this, seek other ways to create, and even though I did feel pressure that was on myself to create this piece for the show, it came with some kind of cathartic release. A lot of the excuse me, a lot of the piece is a lot of lines, a lot of drawing, and drawing those lines kind of just calms my mind, helps me to focus on something other than the anxiety that I have for other things happening in the world. So I think showing that and creating something beautiful out of it, even though I didn't feel like creating before, and that I felt the pressure from other people to create, having that space for myself to sit back and do something for myself and to be able to show it to other people was really important for me. And it's also, a form that I haven't been, media that I haven't been using a lot either. So, I've been doing a lot of collaging. So there's one of my collaging pieces in the bag. But coming back to just using a pen and how simple, that can be and what I can make from it.
Thank you, Alexia. I think it was really poignant, the piece that you said about, literally drawing those lines. Like when we're speaking about boundaries, and you have to create these lines for yourself. So I thought that was really beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Last but not least is, in years past, she has been my, I guess, behind the scenes tag team partner in helping produce Mosaic, or not producing, but at least on the back end. And Simone has done, wears a lot of different hats, and I will let her tell you what those different hats are as she shares with us how she explores her own personal boundaries. Simone, what's up, girl?
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for Ferch. So glad to be able to do Mosaics and to be participating in it once again. Personal boundaries, that is one of the things I think I'm finding for myself when it comes to personal boundaries is that although there are boundaries in my life that are fixed, and there are also boundaries in my life that are a little bit fluid because it depends on the information that comes in. And then where I am right now is I'm in a place where I'm going back and looking at some places where boundaries need to be dismantled. There were some things that were put in place. It could stem from childhood, it could stem from interactions with other people that I'm really looking at in a different light and going, is this something that I really believe? And then as a Christian, being able to go back to the Bible and kind of going, okay, I need to filter this through what the Word of God says concerning my life, concerning who God has called me to be, who I am to Him, who He is to me. Is this something that I took upon myself? Is this something that was imposed on me because of somebody else's perspective, even possibly their limitations? And then really filtering through the Word of God, not cherry picking and not saying, oh, I like the scripture, and so because the scripture works for my agenda, I'm going to use it, but really building line upon line and precept upon precept and looking at things contextually, looking at it in a whole, and then going, okay, God, I see where I fit in this, and now this is where my boundary will be, versus just kind of operating like a spiritual zombie and just going along with it because somebody said that's what I'm supposed to do. It's really filtering through all of that and saying, okay, this is what it said. This is what it actually says. And then building my life from there. And sometimes that causes conflict, right? Because then sometimes I'm seen as the one who's going against the grain. But if I have found the truth and the truth has been interpreted correctly, then I'm going to opt with the truth versus opt with the crowd. And sometimes that's challenging, especially within my own faith circle at times, that there are times when there are people who are just kind of like, well, you're bucking the system. Okay, you're right. I'm bucking the system, but I'm not bucking the word of God. So if I have to choose the system over the word of God is going to win every time, hands down, even if it means that puts me on an island by myself. I'm good. Even when I'm not good, I'm going to choose to be good because that has to have the preeminence in my life. And so that's kind of where I am right now. Is my life is definitely built on the rock and is solid. I'm just redecorating or not redecorating. I'm at a loss for words, which is unusual for anyone who knows me. But the word I'm trying to think of is not redecorate, but you know, when you go into, you decide that you're going to revitalize the kitchen, or you're going to refurbish, rebuild. Someone help me. What's the word? What's the word that
Remodel?
I'm? Huh?
Remodel?
Remodel.
Renovate.
Thank
Renovate.
you. Oh my gosh. Yes. Remodel.
HPC.
And so I find
Renovate.
myself
Yeah.
in a place of remodeling. I also find myself, so there's a sense of remodeling. There's a sense of rebirth. There's a sense of transitioning from, I read a really interesting, and I'm going to close on this. I read a really interesting article yesterday, and the person in it was talking about the difference between transition and change. And they were saying how with change, it's just a matter of, I'll stick with the part that stood out to me. They said transition is about learning to accept a new normal. It's allowing yourself to move from one particular state to another, where the way that they interpreted change was going from one thing to another thing. And I kind of feel like that's where I am in my life, is that there are areas of transition. And so boundaries have to be repositioned. And then there are areas of change, kind of like the caterpillar to the butterfly, where some of the boundaries that were in place just have to be demolished because they were not established correctly. And again, going back to what I was saying earlier about them not being established and rooted really in what the Word of God has to say, but more so what tradition of men, so to speak, had to say about it, and really taking and kind of going back to brass tacks and going back to what does the Word of God say concerning my life and God's expectations for me. And so that's where my boundaries are right now.
Thank you, Simone. I appreciate you. I was shocked that you were at a loss for words, knowing that you do a podcast and you're a preacher and you do all the things, like I said.
Yeah, I really couldn't think of the word. So whoever shouted out remodel, thank you so much.
I think remodel is a wonderful way to put it, because, I think, actually, again, I know that we are in a space where we're not just creating a new normal, because normal is what the heck got us here, right? We're in a position where we're able to build this world that we would love to create for ourselves and for each other. And sometimes, we didn't have the benefit of our family to do that, and some of us did, and I think we'll be exploring that question later, but I would love to open up the floor to any of the artists that are here. And if there's any questions that are from folks that are watching on the YouTube, we'll raise over here. Please leave your questions in the chat, and then we'll address those as well. But if there's something that y'all want to speak to your piece, or maybe something that one of the other speakers said that resonates with you, by all means, Mike, unmute yourself and make your voices heard. Maybe I'll start. I think when it comes to my own personal boundaries, and I didn't share this, even though I think it was shared in the plug, once again, the Artist Building Community Instagram page. I spoke about how personal boundaries, my own personal boundaries, are the spaces for which I create myself, in which I can live and be my most authentic self. And sometimes that's really hard, especially when it is in flux and when you're bargaining with yourself and what that looks like. Because people and the energies, they can permeate these boundaries. And sometimes it's a choice, sometimes it's situational, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, where these boundaries lay is a choice that I have to create daily with myself. And hopefully I'll make that known to others, because my family didn't necessarily teach me those boundaries, but I had to create those boundaries in order for that to take place. And I will open up the floor to everyone else.
Hi. So I just wanted to respond to Alexia and her talking about the pressure to perform and how you came to creating something that honored where you were, like where you are right now with your experiences. And for me, that resonated with me because I also felt pressure, but not pressure from, doing performing and making a piece for this event. Actually, I am grateful that I was able to perform this year because I almost wasn't able to because I had another contract. But so I'm grateful for this. I really feel like everything aligned for me to have this process. But I think what we have here is, and we talked about this, like the permission to express versus perform. And I really love the fact that we pairing our performance with the Q&A to have these conversations. And for me, like a boundary that I always had as an artist is that production boundary of like, okay, like lights, camera, action, I have the stage, I have the costumes, I have all these things. But sometimes like when I had a show last year, I put all this work into producing a show, but I wasn't able to have this kind of conversation. The conversation that I had on the IG Live, the conversation that we're having right here. And to me, like this is a experience for me to just having that biological response of like, oh, I'm feeling this good energy. And it can be simple. It doesn't have to be this blown out show. It doesn't have to be recognized by this person and that person. Like this is affirming to me so much to like lean more into creating the work that allows me to question, allows me to have conversations, and so I'm just moved by everyone's response. But for me, when I created Golden to Jill Scott, I wrote this down as everyone was speaking, and I wrote down when I was thinking about my boundaries and how I created that piece, I was working on my mental and spiritual boundaries, because with everything going on with the pandemic and in our current situations of we're in a public health crisis right now. And I have to set a boundary. So what I did was I created the golden hour, which is an hour before I get to work and an hour before I go to bed, I take space for myself. I heal in whatever makes sense that day, whether that's a bath, music, dancing. And for me, flexing that boundary, I would have never done that before. I would have never been able to appreciate the simplicity of dancing in my room and how that can make an impact by just posting it and doing an IG Live. It's been really a place for me to grow as an artist and realize that having the simple intention and the best intentions to say something is is as impactful as creating a big production. So thank you for this lesson and allowing me to learn that.
Anybody else would like to speak?
Can I speak?
I know. Yes, by all means.
Again, I'm Olivia Jewell. Thank you, Alyssa. I really liked what you had to say about like putting on a big production. I learned that I had to compromise with myself through this process because I'm definitely an overachiever and a perfectionist. So when it came to like preparing to like make my set for my improvisation, I was really being hard on myself. So I had to learn to establish boundaries with myself. I had to learn that I am enough and that whatever I produce, whatever lands is what it is, and it's great. You know, I'm learning to trust myself and my decisions is a big one for me, because as a creator, I feel like I didn't really allow myself for a long time. Like, this is my first time actually putting myself on an online platform in this way. I'm actually terrified of posting pictures and all of that. Like, this is something that I'm inching more into and trying to reclaim for myself as a person and as an artist. This is like space that I know that I deserve to take up unapologetically. So I'm really excited that this is something that we're all learning together. I think that's beautiful. And I just wanted to read a couple like boundaries that I had written down in this process, if that's okay with everyone. Cool. So my voice deserves to be heard. You do not have the permission to touch me. I need space. I changed my mind. Stop. Please ask first. No. That does not make me feel seen, heard, or held. My labor, time, and energy are not free or disposable. I am responsible for my own healing. That's a big one for me, is learning that I am responsible for my own healing. I think as somebody that like was forced into this positionality of caretaker, you know, because that's all I ever knew, I hoped that somebody would do something like that in return for me. So in essence, I abandoned myself for other people, hoping that they would meet me with reciprocity with the same energy, but it's just like a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle. I need to take care of myself. I need to take care of myself. And it's so liberating knowing that and like standing in that power. So yeah,
Yes.
a few others, like I want to hug, something as simple as like just being able to say what I want. That's a big deal for me as somebody that felt like I had to tiptoe around somebody else's feelings and wants and guilt trips, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I'll just do one more or a couple. I am advocating for myself. How can I support myself? How can I support you? I think listening is equally important to making sure that my voice is heard. Like, I want to make sure that the people that I care about, the people that I'm supporting, and the people that are supporting me feel heard. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. If you were able to see all of the YouTube comments and the comments in the chat just from all the different artists here, everybody like, yes, 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 yes. Just because it resonates so much with everyone, it seemed like. There was a question in the chat, speaking of, on the YouTube page, and it is asking, and I'm going to open this up to everyone, how do you tell when your boundaries are being violated? Do you feel a certain sensation in your body, and does an emotion rise up, or how do you notice? I think, and that's the end of the question, but I know that Alexia, I believe, was exploring that a little bit in her description, but I'm going to open it up to everyone as far as like, how can you tell when your boundaries are being violated? Simone, I think you're on mute again.
Okay. Olivia, girl, listen. We're gonna keep this, right? This is gonna stay on the YouTube page because I need to just go back and revisit that several hundred times, all of that. But to answer the question, for me, I start to feel, one of the fastest ways that I can tell is a sense of anger, or I'll start to feel oppressed. I'll start to feel restricted. I'll start to feel um, bound in, like there's just this low grade fever that I can't shake. Um, and it's interesting because there's a gentleman who wrote a book called Boundaries. Cannot think of his name right now. And one of the things that he advocated in his first book, he said, you know, you wake up and you want to go to, he's like, you wake up depressed and you don't want to go to work that day. And he said, you think that the issue is your job. He said, but really it could be that your soul is hurting and your heart has been hurt. And so you need to address the thing that's bothering you. And a lot of times for me, it ties back to what Skylar said about this sense of shrinking, and to what Olivia said about abandoning myself because, you know, you want to make somebody else happy. And that idea of, if I show up for you and if I'm there for you, then you'll be there for me, right? And so you give, and if I find myself giving and giving and giving and giving and giving, but then when I'm in need, I'm now depleted, and it's like there. Oh, I guess I'm gonna have to give to myself. And so there's a sense of feeling angry and somewhat oppressed, and that feeling of being kind of almost like the walls closing in is where I've started to pay attention to that. That's where it starts for me. When I feel almost as though I am being silent, as though there is this invisible hand over my mouth that is preventing me from advancing, kind of holding me back. That's one of it for me.
I'd like to answer the question.
Yeah, please.
I was sitting and thinking, like, what is it? And the first thing that came to mind was fear, right? I think a lot. I've been thinking a lot through trauma responses, and how does my trauma inform how I move? How does my trauma inform how I've like articulated boundaries? And some of the very unique traumas that I hold, but I know other people hold as well, have been, I have been punished for asserting my boundaries, right? And so therefore, my body holds this fear that whenever my boundaries are crossed, that I don't get to articulate them. And I'm so afraid of anticipating the other person's response, in me saying that I'm not okay. And like, I feel that settle into my bones. And actually, one of the lines, if I can read it from my piece, because I was thinking about it. One, also, I want to like Olivia, everything, all of that, period, everything you said. But I was talking about, so my piece was talking about a relationship that I was in, and kind of like a case study of what it looked like for me to honor my boundaries in it. And I said, I am an open, an anticipation of shoe dropping, a stumble toward inauthentic every time I swallow my question mark. Fear of rejection lives here, and I don't know how to move out without burdening her with my portion of the rent. And I think a lot about how that has shown up in how I've moved, in the way in which I've like tried to regain my power. Is really remind myself that if someone is really for me, if I'm really in relationship and community with someone, they are not going to shut me down, right? But that doesn't stop me from my trauma response of wanting to bond, and like asking myself, when I find myself operating in inauthentic, and I find myself going along with things just to keep the peace, like how am I harming myself and doing my abusers work for them? And so that's what I'm into.
I think sometimes too that I've had sometimes where I haven't been exactly sure if my boundaries were crossed, possibly because it was like, you know, the messiness of like microaggression, or just like, you know, the nuances of like dynamics. And sometimes it's like you ask yourself at the end of the day, and it kind of like reminds me of like Simone re-examining the boundaries, which I thought that was a really amazing point and so true. And I had not thought of that yet. Dang it, why did I bring that up? I lost my train of thought. Okay, sorry, y'all. Sorry for my Zoom doom. But oh yeah, that's right. But in that re-examination, it's like sometimes you have to like go through those experiences and those different contexts, and you start like peeling all the different elements of what happened, and you start examining them from all these different perspectives and asking yourself, like, you know, was that me, or was that a violation of my values and my boundaries? And I know that sometimes I feel really like guilty and ashamed for the times in which like I haven't asserted my boundaries, or, you know, like after the fact wanting to go back and feeling like, oh, I wish I had said this, I wish I had done it that way. And also just sharing that the mercy and the grace that comes from knowing that asserting boundaries, defining them, re-examining them, and determining like how you've been impacted like isn't linear. And you know, with some contexts you'll be like really great at it with certain people, and sometimes you won't. And so I don't know if anyone else has had that experience, but I know that I have. Like I can feel when, for the most part, when somebody's violating a boundary, and there have been many times in which I was like, what was that? And so I just wanted to offer that.
I think of it as like reclaiming a boundary, because I didn't grow up. My understanding of boundaries is that is for other people and not for family. And so I think I became accustomed to my boundaries being violated over and over again due to obligation. Like I'm obligated to do this because this is a relative, or I'm obligated to do this because this is what Christians do, or I'm obligated to do this because this is what a younger person does in the presence of an elder, right? So I think of it as, when I leave a situation, if I feel like something is lingering with me, and I can't quite figure out what it is, and my soul feels bothered, I have made it my mission and purpose to figure out, okay, what happened? Who did I talk to earlier? What was the conversation? Let me pick this apart. And then I'm like, I know what the boundary is. I don't like this. Let me go back. And then we can have a conversation about it, because now I've identified that this is a boundary, and it's always been a boundary. However, I didn't feel as though I had the ability to even know that it was being violated, because that had been misused for so long that whenever it probably really bothered me, I learned to suppress it and put it away, because under the circumstances, it's not considered acceptable. So I think of it that way, for me personally.
Something that's coming up for me, and thank you, Nat, and both of what you shared too, Skylar. Something that's coming up for me is like, I'm so grateful for this space, because in Southeast San Diego, when have I ever had a collective conversation about boundaries? Never, ever, ever, ever. So thank you, number one. And then like, yeah, like that internal narrative, like where are the spaces that we can go to process our boundaries and learn about them? I see folks, everyone in this room is doing some kind of work to share it with community in some way. And it's just like, yeah, I find myself wondering where are the spaces we can support each other in navigating the boundaries. Yes, it is an individual thing, but then like, we know, yeah, there's PTSD, there's trauma in the room, and especially in our communities, and we're navigating like how to set boundaries to heal. And then we're like, oh, is that my trauma response? And then we're recommended to maybe talk to one therapist or some in a very individualistic way. But there's harm happening in so many places. And what are the communal spaces that exist so that we can analyze communal boundaries, solidarity in that? I want to build that. Just saying. No, you guys don't need to answer that, but thankful for this space as one, to do it in like an artistic way. But yeah, how's that happen at the high school, elementary school, in the community?
Yeah.
I would love to add to something and everything that everyone's mentioned. And I love, Natasha, that you said, you know, when my soul is being bothered, that's when I know, wait a minute, there needs to be clarity in this boundary. I think that a lot of people, and I'll say this personally, a lot of people sometimes say that I'm very rude because I'm very assertive. Because if I know what I want or I know what I need, I will share it with you. And if you're not understanding me, I will ask you, how can I clarify this then? Let me have you understand where I'm coming from. Don't just dismiss what I just said, because this is important to me. Let me let you know that it's important. Why is it? Boom, boom, boom. And so the fear can often, you know, come like through that. People thinking like they confuse being assertive in saying your boundaries with being rude. Oh, she's just rude. Oh, they're just rude. Culturalmente son groseros. They're like rude. It's not rude. It's knowing what I need and asking you respectfully. So it's also like when we speak like, where are these places? I want to teach that, and I do teach that. Teach it to my son, to my students. Like, no. Let it be known. Tell me more about this so that I can understand, and maybe I won't agree, but I will understand you. And that is very important in sharing those boundaries.
Ooh, can I say something?
Yes, Mitch, go ahead.
Oh, cool. One, physical response to how I know my boundaries are being like crossed or violated. I get a headache, like right off the back, like it's in here all the time. It could be me not letting myself take a break, or me not letting myself get a drink of water, or it could be me having an argument with a friend over something that really concerned me but doesn't seem to matter to them, and so I'm getting a headache and I'm talking like this. That's my first thing. The comment about like my soul is bothered, I feel that, and then it also bothers me because then there's those conversations about like whoever it is or whatever it is that you're bothered with, they don't know that you're holding on to that so much, and so they somehow have this power over you too. And that's also the thing that doesn't sit well with me, and in some way crosses a boundary, because I'm allowing someone else to have this like quote unquote control, and they don't even know that, you know. And so how am I going to then either set a boundary for myself or express my concern and still make it be a place for myself, and not because so-and-so like hurt me or harmed me or disrespected me, but like, how am I going to respect myself in this moment to respond? And I think like changing that around. But so yeah, when my soul is bothered, it is pointed out, like my partner has expressed that to me, like, why are you thinking about that so much if like it wasn't directly an experience of yours? Or why are you feeling that so much if that happened like 2 days ago and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And they're over there like not feeling a thing about what just happened. They're not angry. They're not sad. So why am I like this right now? And so, and at that point, yeah, they may have crossed a boundary, but now I'm also not respecting my own boundaries because I'm just sitting with it and I'm not like actively doing something about it. And so that's something I think that I'm working with. So when it bothers me, yeah, absolutely. I know that a boundary's been broken, but then that's the blurred line where did they break a boundary or did I break my own?
I think that's amazing. And I think that that's also a part of that process of each of us being able to identify what that means. For me, I felt like I put so many other people before myself that I couldn't even identify if it were a boundary, you know. And so I do think that in general, people have this control over you when you decide not to address the boundary. But they also have some sense of control over you if you can't identify it as well, because you will put yourself in harm's way over and over and over again until you figure out what the boundary is.
And then I also want to offer, just for consideration, that for those who may not, who have not refined the practice of having boundaries, that it does take some time, and that there really is no time limit on the healing process or addressing what happens. And so I'm just going to go I'm going to go grandiose on this, on what I'm saying. Let's say it takes you 5 years to figure out that what happened in this incident 5 years ago was what violated your boundary. And after soul searching and digging, you finally got to, this is what it was. And now I have the courage to deal with it. And I have the courage to talk to it. I think that we need to give ourselves grace to know that that's okay. You know what I mean? Because until this becomes a practice and it becomes a part of the way you exist, it's gonna have stops and starts, and it's gonna have moments where it's smooth and rough, and it's gonna be pretty and not so pretty. And now what happens is, how do I address the boundary violation with the offender? Is this something that I want to address because it was serious enough to be addressed? Or is this something that I've made a mental note that, I didn't like when this happened, and should it happen again, then I'm going to address it with them and say, I've noticed that this is a pattern and I don't particularly care for that. I would prefer that you not address me that way. So I think there's something to be said around offering ourselves grace as well as other people when it comes to this whole operating with boundaries. And sometimes that's where the fluidity comes in, because I'm not going to figure it out, or I'm going to think that I had it nailed. And then my soul, I love that phraseology, by the way, Nat, my soul is bothered. And so, when my soul is bothered and it remains bothered, then there's some more digging that needs to take place. And in the digging, I may discover something else. So just giving ourselves grace is what I want to offer for consideration.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
sorry.
Olivia.
Okay.
But
I think
I do want to I'm sorry, let me take a quick second real quick while we're on the topic of boundaries. We're a little bit past our 3:30 time boundary, but so if other folks need to leave the conversation and then carry out with their day, and then by all means, please. But we are in it right now. In fact, we're international. Somebody in the YouTube chat said, "Hi from Turkey," and we're like, "Oh, damn! All right, cool. We're international, baby." So, for those that need to leave, especially if you're an artist that may need to leave at this point, if you're an artist that needs to leave right now, I would love for you to say maybe with one or two sentences or one breath, if that's your preference, what is how does it feel to set a boundary with somebody else? And I didn't mean to cut you off, Olivia. I'm sorry. We'll explore that again when you jump in. But are there any artists that need to leave at our current time boundary? And if so, please tell all of us how it feels to set a boundary with someone else.
Hey, okay, I'll go. So it's like what Rich was saying, it's awkward. I feel like, this is also how I know boundaries are being crossed, is I feel like a tenseness in my throat and a heaviness here. And I have a hard time like breathing. And I didn't know this until this year upon exploring it more. And yeah, so it feels like right now, because I'm still working on the muscle, I feel like it's awkward and I'm not completely comfortable with it. But once I do it, I feel more light. I feel a little less heavy, and I feel more safe and in control of, what I'm doing and who I am. But yeah, so I do have to go, but this was a really beautiful conversation. I'm really glad I could do this time. Thank you.
Can you tell us, folks, your Instagram page before you leave?
Trisha Frula. It's just my name with a dot in between the L's. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
Trisha.
Thank you.
Are there any
I
other
also
artists?
have to go.
Please.
I really appreciate this. I appreciate the space, Matt and Mo. It's been a pleasure to be able to witness MOSAICS grow over the past 4 years and be able to participate. Setting a boundary for me, like I shared, it's really hard, but it also feels freeing, and it makes it feel possible. It makes every boundary that I set going forward feel more possible and accessible. So yeah, that's how it feels. You can find me on Instagram at @andcheesehere_. You can also find the passion project that I'm currently working on with March for Black Women in San Diego. We're doing a mutual aid fund for Black women in San Diego. You can find information about that in the links in my bio on Instagram. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate it.
I too have to say goodbye. Thank you for having me be a part of this beautiful process, and personal boundaries for me is an opportunity of growth. I can always regrow. I can always just shed. I can always just water it. I can always just allow it to just be what it needs to be. Muchas gracias. Gracias a todos. Thank you everybody for sharing the space. And I hope that it continues and it happens again. Gracias. Ciao.
Anyone else? Actually, maybe let's continue with this particular question. How does it feel when you set those boundaries with others?
First, can we go back to Olivia's comment?
Okay, yeah, please. Olivia, if you wanted to address what you wanted to say earlier while it's still in your heart.
I appreciate that. I just wanted to say that I don't think our boundaries necessarily need to be understood to who we're drawing them forward to. It doesn't invalidate the fact that your boundary has been crossed, or yeah, I wanted to make that clear because I think that's really important to me. A couple times when I've tried to assert my boundaries, it was very clear to me, and maybe they were offended or whatever it may be. It's all circumstantial, but the fact of the matter is, whether they agree with it or not doesn't mean that it wasn't valid. I just wanted to put that out there.
That's hella important. That is very important. Skylar, did you want to put your last 2 cents in before you take off?
Yes. I just want to say that this is like what I always hoped my San Diego would feel like. I feel just super proud, honestly. Just seeing it, the pictures of everybody being on here, and just, y'all, thank you. And there's a lot in here that I needed to receive. And, I just want to say that honestly, for somebody like me, where my trauma response is I can do so much fixing and everyone will benefit and no one will know that I will have had to carve everything from my own fingernails, and so boundaries are not necessarily something that I wake up excited to have to define or excited to have to enforce, or, and I would also like to say, such mercy in that's a very human thing. And it's not a Skylar thing. It's not an individual thing. It's a human thing. And my mentor, who was the person who had helped me, especially with the financial piece, which I had literally constructed an entire system around avoiding. I was like, I'm not doing that. And I literally said to her, I would rather die than do this work. I would rather than to have that conversation over and over and over again, because when you're an independent contractor, small business owner, whatever, every conversation around a job, you are having that conversation over and over again. And so getting comfortable with, I will in closing close with Pima Chodron's quote. It's I'm not a big fan of hers. I don't know much about her, but this line stuck to me. And it's when you can sit with the hot sting for 1 second longer than you could the day before, that is the path of the spiritual warrior. And sometimes the growth looks like that in little increments, but it takes a lifetime to do. And we cannot whip our own back for the times in which we did not know what we needed to know. All we can do is that now that I know, how can I do my absolute best? One breath at a time, and it will not be perfect. It will not be linear. And you are absolutely not alone. I love all of you so much. Thank you so much for what you shared and poured into. And I just want to say, please be well and give mercy to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Skylar. Appreciate it. It I want to say this before I continue on, and then I still want to have others explore the idea of what it feels like to actually set these boundaries. Um, we were speaking about how sometimes we don't know what our boundaries are. Sometimes we don't know what we want, even if our body responds in a particular way. I'm a very indecisive person, and sometimes I will flip a coin to make these huge life choices, which is an awkward and stupid thing. But when I realize that when I see a coin and it's something that my heart doesn't want, obviously I wanted something else. So that's when I make that choice. Even if I didn't think I knew, my body knew, you know? So with that, when I set my own personal boundaries, it's liberating, and it's a different kind of freedom. And that's what I would love for all of us to bring into this new future that we create. Would anybody else like to tell us about how they feel when they explore and tell people these boundaries?
For me, it feels terrifying most times. Terrifying, confusing, and even when setting it, still scary. Shaky voice, all kinds of things. Waiting for people's response, second guessing myself afterwards if that boundary was okay. It feels like a series of nights or months of a pit in my stomach. It feels like asking my ancestors every day, what is the right choice? It feels like asking like any other person except for myself what my boundary is. It feels terrible. the journey to the boundary. Oh God. It feels like staying up till 2 or 3 in the morning, reading manual after manual of mental health, cycles of change, cycles of trauma and addiction, and trying to find myself somewhere in there. And it feels like cycles of just trying to take myself to the moment to make the choice. And when I do, I don't know when I feel free, but at some point I will feel free. It's usually not right after. It'll be like at a moment where it feels like even when I am free and experiencing that joy, there's still an after effect of like, wow, it took this much to get here. And so it feels like a mixture of grief and joy after setting a boundary. It feels like deep pride that is here and off my shoulders. Yeah, it feels like a whole lot of things. And it feels like a cut usually, or it feels like running. Yes, but I dream of the days when they can just be like stone, like nope, 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 or when it can feel like a dance groove where I'm just like, sight, nope. When I find that groove, I dream of when it will be like that. For now, it is the hamster wheel trying to jump off and be like, I'm free. But it's all good. That's where I'm at. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That spoke to me a lot, even though I did say, freedom and liberation is what it feels like. That the thing that you said about the journey to the boundaries. If we don't know them, sometimes that journey is rough. It is painful. It's scary. It's stressful. The way your heart beats before you are about to set the boundary, that can be quite difficult and a very human thing to explore. How about other folks? I think we have a couple others.
I just wanted to add, to what Olivia said earlier about, having the message out there to the person and being okay that you already said it to them and, not needing the response from them back. It's important for me to, realize when someone is, when someone's responsive, of course, and when someone is also turning it on me and thinking that, oh, you're crazy for, thinking that's something that is, not appropriate, so essentially gaslighting me, right? So in recognizing that that is there, and when I need to, create a bigger boundary between me and this person, or, essentially cut them off if I needed to, and being able to let go of that as well. So for me, feels liberating. I also shake a lot, and I get really anxious, and I get afraid, and I worry, and I'm staring at my phone like, oh, this person gonna respond to me and everything. And but I tell myself, I'm anxious because I care, because this is important to me. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's like 2 in a row where we was talking about cutting folks off. And sometimes the cutoff, like, very much is what has been said earlier, is like there needs to be grief sometimes with that. So sometimes setting the boundaries does create grief, because there's loss there. There's loss of a connection, there's loss of something, and sometimes that's what setting boundaries feels like.
I like that you brought up grief again, because that's actually what I was going to circle back to. I think for me, it's the loss of the person that I was to that person, and the person that I was being for however long I was in that relationship with them. And so if they're a family member, that's the person that I've always been to you, right? And now I'm saying I am who I am, and I'm owning that. And that cannot be redefined by someone outside of me. That can only be defined by me. And so by me setting this hard boundary, sometimes it's like, ooh, things will never be the same after this. Why? Because you will never see me as who that person was. And I'm not interested in going back to this version of myself that allowed you to feel comfortable while I was uncomfortable with who I am. So the grief piece, I think, is really big when you think about setting boundaries. And there's a great example in the book that Simone was talking about. Setting boundaries is like a house. And so they're like, sometimes you set a boundary and you're like, okay, you can from now on only be in the living room. You can no longer go into any other rooms of the house. And then it's like, nope, you still breaking things on the porch. Still not acting right in the lawn. Still not acting right outside the fence. Maybe you need to cross the street. Maybe we just need to change neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a process to it. I think we all have to figure out for ourselves, where do people fit within that?
I read a quote that I really liked, and it was at a time when I was struggling with a boundary that I was establishing for myself. And there was fear around it, right? Because it was kind of like, okay. And so my conversation with God went somewhere along the lines of, okay, if I do this thing and forgive, which I know you're asking me to do, does this mean that I'm going to repeat the same behavior that got me to a place where I needed to forgive, right? And I read a quote, and it was the answer that I needed, that said, when you heal, you will not be the person you were before. And that brought me a great sense of like, whew, I feel like I can breathe a little bit better, because to know that on the other side of healing is the old me, and that I really won't be going back to her. If I find myself going back to her, then it means I haven't healed. And so I want to tag that to what Alyssa said earlier about the golden hour. And for me, I find that when I do establish that personal boundary for me, and my golden hour is when I get up early enough to sit and have a cup of coffee in my library. So really quick side note, I realized I wasn't using my dining room, and I'm like, okay, so this is just taking up space in my house for no reason, and I'm just going to repurpose it. So I turned my dining room into a library because I have a ton of books and enough to warrant a library. So for me, when I go into my library and I have a cup of coffee and I sit and I have morning devotion and I'm able to listen to worship music and really just soak in it and read the word of God and really take in what God has to say to me, I am better able to not only sustain my boundaries, to see what the violations are coming ahead of time so I can be like, no, we're going to sidestep this, or no, I need to really take control of this conversation because it's going in a direction that I really don't want it to go. And I find that when I don't take the time to have that golden hour, that I do myself a disservice as I go throughout my day. And the thing that I'm going to borrow from you and carry forward, Alyssa, is to make sure that I have that hour at the end of the day, because so often I don't do the hour at the end of the day. And what can become detrimental to me is I can then carry things over from the day before if I don't really create a space around letting go the day, so that when I go to bed, I'm going to bed with my boundaries. Now, this is what works for me, with my boundaries firmly established and kind of in place. Even if the boundary is, I'm not healed from this yet, but I'm going to contain it right here. That way it doesn't kind of just seep all over the place. You know, so that's what I wanted to offer. I have about 3 more minutes until I have to go, but I'm gonna hang because Nat, Mo, listen, you two, big heart, big heart. Love you guys so much, and for this space and for what you are creating, not just for artists, but for other people. And Ferch, you know you're the man. You know you're the man. Olivia, you preached
Love
a
you,
whole
girl.
entire sermon. Babe, oh my gosh, my heart, like when you were crying, I just wanted to hug you, like, don't cry, or okay, cry, I'll hold you. Alyssa, Michelle, thank you all so much. Alexia, thank you all so much. So I'm gonna hang until I have to go.
Thanks, Simone. We had one final question that we would love to explore from the chat. So let's use this as our closing within these last couple of minutes that we have. And if we could do it in 1 or 2 sentences or in one breath, if you practice that. The question is, what are ways that you practice acceptance of change in yourself after setting or breaking down boundaries? Or if you have any mantras or rituals that you can share that have helped you.
I actually wasn't sure if I could answer this question when I saw it, but I think something that's become a common practice for me is I actually have like a virtual journal where I type up who I was before and who I am now as a reminder that the boundaries that I've set, especially the really hard ones, were beneficial to me and my well-being and my mental health. And so when I get forgetful, I can always go back and I'm like, oh yes, I used to people please. That wasn't fun. Oh yes, okay, okay. I know what I was doing before. I'm not doing any of that now. We can carry on. And then I've also created a list of like things that people have told me about who I am that are untrue, and the boundaries that I have set and the progress that has come from that. So I think for me, it's become therapeutic to document those things for myself as a reminder.
I would agree with Nat on that. I definitely use journaling as a way to release and reflect. And then I use affirmations to affirm myself and to uplift my energy. So I do both. So I usually do affirmations in the beginning of my day because I'm like just setting my mindset for the day, creating an intention. And then I definitely journal at the end of the day to release and process, like Simone was saying. And so I think those are two tools that you can create on your own with your pen and paper or in your mind with the intention. So I hope that helps.
I use breath, a deep breath in, a deep breath out. If that's all I got time for. I use the water rituals, like I mentioned, praying to the waters, being like, no negative things in here, bye. And then I pour it out in the toilet. Or if I am doing, especially some other work with some, I'm like, no cursing. So I'm like, what would I call this? Just some bad things, jujus. I use salt, in I wash with salt, or I can scrub salt on myself as a way to remind myself, like, I don't got that gunk on me, and I can do that regularly too. Other herbs that are helpful are basil and rosemary, scrubbing that on the body, or scrubbing that on the body, or taking a bath with that helps me in nourishing me after doing hard things.
Thank you. And where can people find you?
Oh, online. I'm a hider too, but Instagram, BABAYLANGLES, Babayel Angles. I know I'm always turtle, but you can find me there, or I have a website that's attached there too. I forget the .com, to be honest right now. It's too much with the boundaries conversation. Just find me on IG.
Okay.
I just got my notification. So I wanted to submit to answer the question. The learning to accept the change comes in two forms. One, it's me learning to consistently come into agreement with what the Word of God says about me and really standing in that. And then the second part is learning that I don't need the approval of others for me to maintain this boundary. I don't need other people to be like, oh, good job, or, oh yeah, I agree with your boundary. And so that's how I walk in the acceptance. You can find me, I'm just gonna say IG. You can find me at Simone, SIMONE, Edwards Ministries on Instagram. And then like Babe, I have links that are there. And I just want to throw this out. I'm not trying to violate anyone's boundaries, but if you really want to have a conversation about God or about the Bible or anything like that, or even a study in the Bible, I'm available as a resource for you, available to have that conversation. And if I'm not the person, maybe I can direct you to somebody who better suits you. So have a great day. Love you all. Bye.
Thank you, sis. Michelle, Olivia?
Yeah. Hi. How do I accept change? That's the question?
Yeah, it's what are ways you practice acceptance of change in yourself after setting or breaking down these boundaries?
Oh, okay. Awesome. I also practice a salt ritual that I think is really effective for releasing and putting up an energetic boundary, neutralizing. Something else that I do is I seek nature, so I'll plant seeds. Recently, I planted daisy, sunflowers, and lavender, and I set intentions with the seeds. So like fulfillment, risk-taking, self-soothing, these sort of intentions. And I feel like there's some sort of like symbiotic relationship watching these seeds grow, watching them, nurturing them. And I feel that I'm growing as I'm tending to them. So that's a way that I can physically see what's happening inside of me. And you can find me at Urass on Instagram. That's YUH__RASS, Urass.
Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you.
So I also journal and do a lot of mind dumping because I have a lot going on in my head, right? So I just like to dump everything out on paper. And also want to say it's important for me too to have, I have a couple of friends who are willing to hold space for me to process things. And, it's not just me, but all of us processing things together. So I think it's really important that I have that support. And then you can find me on IG at Baolexia, BAO Lexia, LEXIA.
Ooh, I'll
Thank
make this
you.
quick. I'll make it quick. The ways that I accept change, I say thank you to myself. Thanks me for letting me do that. Thank you for giving yourself time, but also thank you to the people that create the space to allow for change. So thank you to you all for this space as well. And also it may sound weird, but like research, when I find things that interest me or serve me and the things that I want to do or the boundaries I want to set up or break down or whatever, I'm gonna read about it. If it interests me, if it's something I like, if I know that it's going to benefit me, I'm going to look up everything I want to know about it and try and incorporate whatever it is that I find or share that with other people. Sharing is also one of the bigger things to practice acceptance and continue that change and constantly evolve is to share. Okay. M_limbs, that's the Instagram. It has a lot of my work, but also a lot of my students' work. Yay. Thank you.
Thanks, Midge. Alyssa.
Hello. You want me to answer the question?
Only if you'd like to.
Can you repeat it one more time?
Sure. So what are ways you practice acceptance of change in yourself after setting or breaking down boundaries? Or if you have any mantras or rituals to share that have helped you. And I know because you practice with Sultry Sisters, that might be more than one you might want to answer, but please share.
So how I accept change in new boundaries that I set, I sit with it, I play with it, I celebrate in it. That's something that's new to me because it's been a process recently to define them in my journal, define them in my interpersonal relationships. So I'm celebrating them and sitting in them. And then I think I added about my rituals. I like to share. So I want to promote that I have a space where me and my sister created called Sultry Sisters. So you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. If you want to connect with us and continue to collectively heal together. If you want to see my work, my choreography, it's at continuum.sd. And that's pretty much the two handles. My personal handle is Miss_AJ, but that's just a lot. So you could just go to one of them and you'll find me in the interweb.
In the ether of the interwebs. Thank you, Alyssa. I wanted to close with our founders and also, first of all, a big thank you to all of our creatives and our artists. I'm sure I share the sentiments around everyone else when just expressing gratitude for giving us this retreat from what's actually like going on. Like literally the world is on fire right now. So I want to thank you all for helping share this space. And I want to thank Heidi for operating the whole back end of everything going on right now. So shout out to Heidi, actually getting it done. And I want to thank you all for being here and thank you for listening. You can find us more on YouTube. Don't forget to visit their Instagram page, Artist Building Community. You can find all the different artists out there. Yeah, helicopters, ghetto birds, pork chops flying everywhere. But please, I also want us to have us close out with our I want to say founders, but you always say co-producers. But Nat and Mo, if you have any closing words, I just want to say thank you to you all for creating this space. Thank you all for being here. And I love you all. Let's live, love, laugh, and build this future that we want to create. With that said, Nat and Mo. please take us home.
So co-founders, co-producers, correct, co-producers of MOSAICS, co-founders of Artist Building Community Project. We are super, super thankful and grateful for every single artist, every individual who helped us make MOSAICS virtual. I mean, Mo and I really had no idea if we could even do it. Because I think for most of you who know and who've been able to physically be in the space for a MOSAICS, it's special. And there's a way that we're able to collectively come together and explore without judgment, without someone telling you that it's right or wrong. We just expect that you come and be open and listen to how other people are dealing with an issue and examine how you may be dealing with that same issue. So we're super thankful. Heidi literally saved us because Mo and I know nothing about technology. So we're super grateful to her and to Jeff. They've both been amazing. Ferch has been our MC for the last 3 years now, so we're super happy about that. And all of you guys really have been supportive of us over the last couple of years in some way, shape, or form. I think Olivia and Adeseli are our newest artists. And we try to be intentional about bringing new artists into the space, but also having a lot of artists who know what this thing is and can help propel it virtually so that other people get to feel and experience what it is that we hoped to achieve through this, which is healing and, thoughtful and intentional dialogue. So just thank you. I was in awe of each and every one of your art pieces, and just super grateful that you guys really showed up and did powerful work. And that's, if I go any deeper, I'm going to be on YouTube Live crying, and I would prefer not to be. That's my boundary.
Thank you, Nat. And I'd like to also add, this might seem like a small thing, but during our in-person MOSAICS events, we usually have a little altar that we set up for all of our ancestors and any other spirits in the space. And we also share food with everyone who comes. And, that these were like things that I really wanted to be able to share, but I can't share food in Zoom. But I just want to bring that up because I want to encourage everyone and hope that everyone is able to nourish themselves after this. I know that this space has been, it feels like a really good space for us, like mentally, especially emotionally, all these different things. But I think taking a few moments to nourish ourselves, whether that's with a drink, a beverage, tea, some fruit, something small, just to make sure we also, nourish our bodies too. So thank you all. Ferch, any other things you'd like to add before we end the stream?
No, that was, y'all speak of nourishment, and this conversation is definitely nourishing and is giving life to not just me, and I'm hoping it was also everyone else. So thank you. Thank you all. Love it. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.